In my Art Scroll translation, it
Perfect.
says, Noah was a righteous man, perfect in his generation.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it seems like a bit of hyperbole. I mean,
yeah.
does that mean
very
he
much
never
so.
had an accidental emission at night?
Well, I that's hard to believe, especially if he's, whatever was
Healthy.
going on in that tent. But yeah, and if he was healthy, which he must have been. He had 3 sons. But it says here that he was blameless in his age. That seems to me more plausible because we're saying that, given the standards of his time, you'd be a fool to complain about Noah's performance given the context he was working in. So that makes sense. He's living in a terrible age, full of people who deserve to be smitten by Hashem, and given that those peers, he was a good guy. He was a very righteous guy.
Do you think these people are any worse than like Los Angelinos?
I don't know. I mean, does it give us any hint about what they had?
Well, just the earth had become corrupt before God and had become filled with robbery. So it's interesting that it says robbery. It doesn't say sodomy.
Right.
Like, you'd think it'd blame it on the fags.
Yeah. Full of robbers. Well, good Lord. If
Why do they blame the gays?
Yeah.
That's
Keep
what I
it
would
simple,
do.
at least. Like, yeah.
All the sodomites.
Because now we got to think, if he'd said that, we could have just gone, no, yeah, we get it.
Yeah,
But now he
we get
says
it.
robbers, and we're like, huh?
Yeah, like, why would he... Robbery, that was the thing that he wanted to destroy the world war, because everyone was committing robbery.
Robbery. Well, I don't know exactly what that means, but if it means trying to pilfer the wealth of people who don't deserve it, then good Lord, this is the heyday of robbery we're living in, right? I mean, every business...
And it twice says robbery. So, chapter 6, verse 11, the earth had become corrupt before God, and the earth had become filled with robbery. Then 13, God said to Noah, the end of all flesh, come before me, for the earth is filled with robbery.
That's bizarre.
So he's really... God is not pleased with robbery.
Well, what do you know any more than I do? What does robbery mean judaically? I mean, it could mean robbing wives or something.
What's it called when you steal stuff with force? Armed robbery.
Armed robbery, right?
Yeah, I guess maybe that's it. I mean, it has to be more than just cheating on taxes and like
Right.
illegally downloading, other people's property.
Right. Well, you'd hope so.
Maybe everyone was using Napster. But I'd hope that God wouldn't destroy the world because
For Napster?
everyone was like
Yeah, he's fighting a
Napstering.
losing battle if he tries to get rid of that peer-to-peer technology. But even God can't stand in the way of a rising tide. But I don't know. Robbery. Whenever I hear about the rabbinic interpretation of these kinds of crimes, whether it's theft, because my understanding was that theft was like the theft of women. It was the traditional
Kidnapping.
rabbinic
Yeah, that's
interpretation.
the Ten Commandments. Doesn't really mean that.
The-
It
what
means
it said.
kidnapping.
Right. So I don't know what robbery means here, but certainly it doesn't sound like cause for destroying the world. And if it's just taking what is not rightfully yours, then certainly we're overdue for another flood.
Now, this is the Art Scroll commentary on this.
Right.
Such is the progression of sin. Begins in private when people still have a sense of right and wrong. Once people develop the habit of sinning, they gradually lose their shame and immoral behavior becomes the accepted, even the required norm. In Noah's time, the immoral sexual conduct of the people extended to animals as well, till they too cohabitated with other species. So I guess you'd walk along and you see a dog humping a cat.
Wow, that's kind of cool. Well, they'll do that. Yeah. So it was a sexual thing.
So, I mean, but they're working that in there because that's not in the plain...
Right.
Like, if I was writing it, I would have blamed the gays.
Right. And if I was reading it plainly and innocently as I do, I would just think, oh, they were stealing stuff from other people. And yeah,
Right,
robbery,
right.
like you do it in person, like you hold a gun to them and say, give me your money.
Right.
But somehow the rabbis look at it and they get to, well, sex with animals and animals having sex with other animals, and I don't know. What is this aversion to, in Judaism, this intense aversion to mixing like with unlike?
Mixing, yeah, that's pretty heavy in Judaism.
Yeah. I mean, you do have to, I mean...
You can't mix linen with wool, you can't plow a a field with a cow and a horse
Right.
yoked together.
And keeping Israel separate from the nations, obviously.
Right. So, like, these details are a big deal. I mean, look at the really explicit directions for the ark. Make an ark 50 cubits width and 30 cubits height, and a window you shall make for the ark to a cubit, finish it from above. Put the entrance of the ark in its side. Make it with bottom, second, and third decks. I mean, this is like the Titanic.
Yeah.
But, I mean, he's really specific.
The
God of the Torah is really specific, so just, like, do what your heart, prompts. There's not...
No, that doesn't work. No, there's intense attention to detail. But I just wonder... Yes, the details are excruciatingly important, but it's like... With the animals there, I'm just thinking how you get to... From robbery to, oh my god, dogs are humping cats. And that this is a cause to destroy all of creation. Everything has to be just so. Everything in its place, everything in its appropriate order. And a violation of that natural or divine order is a catastrophe.
Yeah, it's like, so don't bring sprinkles into someone's apartment.
Right. Right,
keeps
if you've got...
pressure.
Yeah, if you're... Or otherwise, destruction. It's very heavy. It's a big burden to take on.
Mm-hmm.
And it brings me back to that fascist regime thing.
Do you think God's guilty of hate speech? I mean, because do you really think everyone was corrupt? Or there was just enough corruption that he says... Because just imagine, instead of saying human beings are corrupt, God said, and black people were corrupt. I mean, he'd get his head handed to him today if
yes,
he tried
he would.
to. So this is like hate speech.
Right. Well, Rambam gets his head handed to him today because he refers to Kushim, which is black people, in a derogatory way. I think kind of insulting the integrity of their souls. And yeah, no, that doesn't go over in today's environment.
I mean, this is hate speech. Everyone's corrupt.
Well,
all flesh is corrupt. And then he commits, like, mass genocide.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's maybe.
I
it's
mean,
not
what would the
hate speech
Museum of Tolerance have to say about this sort of stuff?
Well, if they were consistent, they would have very little positive to say about it. I'm sure they could pull a tikkun olam out of there somewhere. But,
yeah,
but
it really means tikkun olam.
Well, it's not. At least if it's hate speech directed against human beings generally, because he's speaking universally about all humans, other than Noah and his offspring. So maybe it's not. Maybe because he doesn't. Maybe because he makes such sweeping generalizations. They're so sweeping that in fact they're no longer hate speech. Because they're about all humanity.
Right. So it's not just he's saying, I hate cripples.
Right. He's not saying maybe that's the truth, but he's covering his ass by saying I hate everyone.
Also thinking about the progression of sin, the section of the Art Scroll. Once again, it's when sin becomes public and accepted, and people aren't shocked and appalled and ashamed.
Right.
That's the problem. So, like, you privately watch a little something naughty in your home with the blinds down.
Right.
That's one thing, but you walk down Pico Boulevard, looking at it on your BlackBerry, and people can see. That's another thing. So once again, it's like, when it goes public and people aren't ashamed. Like when I sin, at least I feel guilty, so it's not so bad. But if I started sinning and I didn't feel ashamed, then...
Well, is the guilt necessary, or is it just don't do it publicly where it can be made a social norm? Do you need even to feel guilty? Let's say, Luke is sleeping with horses in here when no one else is around. Do you need to feel guilty about that?
Well, the Art Scroll says, but once people develop the habit of sinning, they gradually lose their shame. So the Art Scroll wants people to retain their shame.
Their shame. So shame is... See, because one thing Jews will often say is that or American Jews anyways, is that Christianity is all about, tries to control your thoughts and tells you how to feel. Judaism is just, action-centered. And that's probably true in a lot of ways. But here, no, I mean, it does want you to retain a sense of shame for violating your responsibilities.
So what about, like, after the Ark lands?
Shame is a terrible feeling. But yeah, okay, sorry, continue.
Okay, after the ark lands, so supposedly it landed on top of